Hi, everyone. Today we'll be discussing the effect of news sharing and credibility on Generation Z. I'm Stephanie Brand.
And I'm Andrea.
So, as the introduction for our study, this study consisted of researching how readers from Generation Z are more likely to believe a news article is credible if it's shared by a peer. So, this is also our hypothesis. We were trying to see if someone shares something on Facebook or Twitter or whatever social media site, a younger person is more likely to find it credible because it was shared by a friend, opposed to it just appearing on their newsfeed. So some of the key concepts for this was that this study consisted of surveying participants based on topics that included social media account usage and which sites were used the most in order to acquire news, as well as celebrity influence. And then we also will discuss some like educational topics on news literacy. And then we also discussed interpersonal relationships between a friend and family dynamic.
So for the literature review in our research paper, the measurable variables that we looked at consisted mainly of social media accounts, which focused on what social media platforms Generation Z are most active on. Location focused on the participants and where they were located. Does it affect the original hypothesis we were looking at? We also focused on socialization, which was more in depth on how participants interact in social settings, and family and acquaintances focused on the influence that their family members and people that they associated with had on Generation Z and also with their political views. And then in some of the studies that we focused on, with keywords being relationships and acquaintances, the study that we focused on showed the outcomes of youths who converse with their parents regarding political views. The study also showed the number of students that were participants and if they were or were not involved with student government in their schools. With the study focusing on socialization, it studied youths and their news consumption, that gathered data on how often they visit online sources for their news or any new information that they were looking for. Um, the study that focused on wording used manipulated headlines from the Washington Post and Fox News, and they made participants choose whether the headline fit liberal standards or conservative values. Um, and that coincided with the political side most of the time that the participants fell under as well. And then for social media accounts, the study focused on social media accounts, and how the news the news found wow oh my god okay A study focused on social media accounts allowed the percip. Oh my god. Sorry, my birds like completely threw me off because they won't stop. Okay, I'll try to cut this out. The study on social media accounts focused on what social media platforms they used and the importance that they gave those social media accounts, and then the methods.
So, the methods that we used in order to actually conduct our research for this study was that we obviously were focusing on Generation Z. So, these are the types of participants that we surveyed. So, it was mainly males, females, and non binary participants that were between the ages of 18 to 25 and were all enrolled in a college undergrad program. So our survey was created using Qualtrics, and then we distributed it in a couple different ways between the two of us. We sent it via text message to some of our friends, as well as posted it on our own Instagram, asking people that if they were interested, we would send them the link. And then we also emailed it to some of our other students from, the university and friends as well. Then participants were then asked to complete the 14 question survey. So throughout the questions, we just outlined more so the same topics that Andrea just explained throughout the literature review. And they were all answered anonymously. So everything was confidential. We don't know who answered what. So it was completely random as well. And then, definitely one of the biggest problems that we encountered while using this method is that we had a hard time actually getting people to respond to the survey because there was really no incentive to complete it. It wasn't like for a grade or because you would win something at the end of it. So we definitely asked, I think, about like 300 people and got exactly 50 to respond after having to ask multiple times. So that was definitely a little bit of a struggle.
We did successfully get the 50 students on the third try of sending out the questionnaire as well.
So these are our results that were based on the correlation between news and social media. So when it came to finding news, the majority of the participants, said that they were very confident in finding credible news on social media. So 25% of the students chose that answer, which is 50% of the people that we surveyed felt like, whatever they find online via Facebook, LinkedIn, whatever is what they would consider to be credible news. When it came to the meaning of news, the majority of participants voted to be somewhat confident in the meanings of news through social media, with 27 participants leaning towards being somewhat confident. Again, this is the majority, a little over 50%. Felt like they were kind of confident, not all the way, when it came to what does the stuff that is constantly being fed to us through our social media feeds, what does that mean? We often see all these headlines that are just kind of like filled with random information, and we don't necessarily know what it means or what the article is talking about. So they felt somewhat confident on being able to decipher that. When it came to news importance, the majority of participants responded that they are somewhat likely to give importance to news found on social media. So basically what this means is, how important is it for you to go and maybe talk about what you read with someone else or repost it, reshare it? Like, how much importance are you giving this? Are you just reading the first two sentences and calling it quits? Are you reading the entire article? Are you again, talking about it, discussing it amongst your friends, your classmates, things like that? So that was kind of like, again, in between. Then, when it came to social media usage, the majority of participants use social media sites like Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn um, about once a day to search for news. So, and from a personal standpoint, I found this to be a little surprising because I think that people definitely access social media maybe more than once a day, but when it came to actually using it for the purpose of finding or seeking news, it really just, the average answer was that it was only once.
Did I miss a slide?
Yeah. Okay, so then now we're going to talk about the results that we found in between the correlations of news and interpersonal relationships. So when it came to parental discussion, when we questioned our participants about, the topic of conversation within households between the participants and their parents regarding news, 36% of them said, 36 participants, not percent, said that they do have conversations with their parents at home. So I think now that we live in such a digital age, a lot of people are starting to discuss how interpersonal relationships and conversations are starting to diminish because we spend so much time on our phone. So it was definitely interesting to see that we are still having these conversations with our parents and away from our phones. When it came to peer discussion, a lot of the participants said that they strongly agreed that it's important to know what's going on in the world amongst their friend groups, meaning that, they are often discussing current events with their friends, popular topics, things of that realm. And then 25% said somewhat agree. So the majority was in between that strongly agree, somewhat agree, which is, again, just reiterates that these interpersonal conversations about the news and current events are still happening. And then more than half of the participants agree that political issues are a topic of conversation among their peers. I think that politics is one of the most common news stories and is often pushed, through the news cycle more than once a day. So to see that this is again something that is being discussed with your friends really goes to show that this is obviously important, and that type of news is also still very relevant. We then went on to survey regarding celebrity influence, and the majority of participants agreed that they never retweet or repost celebrities on social media. So, now we live in a time where influencers are so big and so important and really try to influence us on things. So it was definitely interesting to see that a lot of our participants don't retweet or repost something that a celebrity posts, showing us that they're not necessarily influenced by them, especially when it comes to news related topics. Just because a celebrity posts something doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to find it credible, or that we're even going to go as far as to share it with our own followers. And then when it came to education, the majority of the participants, 39 of them, voted to never have an association with the school newspaper. And then when asked if news reporting reliability is taught in the participant schools, 17 of them agreed that they have learned what makes reporting, good news reporting. So news literacy is obviously very important when it comes to this topic of studying news credibility, because if we're educated on that topic and we know what we're looking for in order to find what's real and quote unquote fake news, then we can start to filter out these articles that aren't credible, and we won't rely on other aspects like peers or our parents or celebrities or whatever it may be in order to decide if something is credible or not. If we're literate and educated on this topic, then we can make those decisions for ourselves. So for the discussion and the conclusion, at the completion of this research, we were able to find that the majority of the participants still continue to have news-related conversations at home and with peers despite living in a digital era, showing us that friend and family relationships continue to have a major impact on the news that is sought out and believed to be credible. Overall, this study allowed us to learn more about whether or not interpersonal relationships affected news credibility, and we were able to find that peer and family dynamics still have a big impact on the discussion and credibility of news sources, despite living in a time where online relationships are more prominent than ever. There's one more slide.
Oh, there's. Oh, oops.
All right, and that's it. Thank you, everyone, for watching.